Speaker, the Labor Party is opposed to this bill. This bill does not achieve the purposes that are set out in Part 1 of the bill. I recall very clearly the Prime Minister saying that he wanted to settle this issue. This bill does not settle the issue. The bill says that it provides a durable solution. This bill does not provide a durable solution. The Maori Party itself says it does not provide a durable solution. It says that this is simply a temporary stopgap.
Point of order, Chris Tremaine.
This is a tight clause. It's dealing with the preamble of the bill. I ask you to call the Leader of the Opposition to account on this issue.
Order. I will determine the relevancy. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It says that this bill, the purpose of the bill, is to establish a durable scheme. Tariana Turia and Peter Sharples are both on record as saying that this is simply a stopgap until they can get more. And if that's all this bill is, Mr Speaker, the Minister in the chair is wasting the time of this House in bringing it in. I remember very clearly the Prime Minister saying that if there was not broad support for this bill, then he would withdraw it. Was there broad support for this bill? 4,500 submissions, Mr Chairman, to the Select Committee, overwhelmingly opposed to this legislation, strongly opposed to this legislation from a cross-section of New Zealanders. Supporters of the National Party strongly opposed to this bill. Supporters of the Maori Party strongly opposed to this bill. And the reason that the Maori Party has been split asunder is because they could not reach agreement themselves on this bill. We should not be surprised, Mr Chairman, when we consider the history of this bill. This bill is a response to the foreshore and seabed legislation. National, in opposition, said the foreshore and seabed legislation went too far, bent over backwards to give more to the Maori people than they should have got. Ran the campaigns, iwi versus Kiwi, the dog whistle, the race-based card, played time and again. And I've got to tell you, Mr Chairman, that the hundreds of letters that have been sent to the Prime Minister and copied to me from every electorate represented by the national members opposite say that the Prime Minister betrayed what he said before the election.
Order. The member cannot bring the chair into this debate. I'll ask him to... I'll ask the member to remember that, all members, the chair is not part of this debate. Honourable member.
The truth is, Mr Chairman, that the National Party promised one thing before the election and betrayed its own supporters by not delivering what they promised. And the Maori Party did exactly the same thing, because the Maori Party said the foreshore and seabed was a disgrace and a disaster, and they've ended up supporting something that most of their supporters can't differentiate between what was in the foreshore and seabed legislation and what the National Party has put into this legislation. The reason this bill fails is because it was simply a fig leaf for the National Party to hide the fact that they promised one thing and they delivered something totally different through the Attorney General, and a fig leaf for the Maori Party because they promised something that even two-thirds of their own supporters say they have failed to deliver. No wonder there is embarrassment. No wonder there is the determination to pass this legislation under the cover of the Christchurch earthquake, when the National-led government was saying to Parliament, this is a time to avoid bitter partisan dispute. That's what they said, but what did they do? They brought in legislation that they could get through, hoping that nobody would notice, because we were all focused on the needs of the people in Christchurch. Now, if that was all they did, it would have been bad enough, Mr. Chairman. But what they did is that they went through those 4,500 submissions, and the department spent hours and hours of time analysing those submissions. They went back to the Select Committee chaired by Tauhanare, and after hours of people giving submissions, after countless hours of the department compiling a report, how long did they give in the Select Committee to the consideration of this bill? Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
Before we carry on, and I'll give the member the call, this is the preamble. All right, we're on the preamble, and I'll ask from now on that we stick to the preamble. That's what we're debating, not... All right, Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the preamble sets out the history of this legislation. This legislation was taken back to the House, introduced as a bill, taken to the Select Committee, with the pretence that people's voices will be heard. And I say, Mr. Chairman, that it makes a farce of the democratic process for people not to have been heard, for Tauhanare to have forced this through the Select Committee in 2 hours. 2 hours to consider thousands of submissions, to consider a 500-page report. Now, the chairman of the Select Committee might be a speed reader, but I don't believe that he or any other member of the Select Committee gave...
Point of order.
Mr. Speaker, just following your ruling previously, this is the preamble. Clearly, he has not read the bill.
Thank you. I'll determine relevancy. I do ask the member, preamble, it's on page 8.
Mr. Speaker, as the preamble sets out, what we should be trying to do in this House is find common ground. We had the division over the foreshore and seabed. Everyone in this House now agrees that it was right to legislate for public access. Every party agrees on that. Every party in this House agrees that customary title is something that should not be alienated. What we are seeking to resolve is how to determine customary title. And what this bill does, and as the preamble sets out the history of it, the way this bill is constructed is that customary title can be determined not impartially and independently by the judiciary, but rather by a political deal between the National Party and the Maori Party. And I have to say, Mr. Chairman, we saw such political deals in the emissions trading scheme.
Order. I have mentioned, and I won't say it again, preamble. That's what we're on, page 7. Preamble. When I ask the member to come back to that preamble. Point of order.
Mr. Speaker, the preamble does set out a history to this legislation, and
I know what the preamble does. Thank you. We're not talking about, the members just talked about emissions trading schemes. Let's focus on the preamble. It's very clear what it is, and I'll ask the member to continue. Honourable Secretary Manager.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister and the Chair made some very broad comments about this agreement.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, it is, I think all the Leader of the Opposition said was effectively it was a dirty little deal like the emissions trading scheme.
Thank you. Look, I have given some latitude in the first 5-minute speech, and I'm now asking the member and other members when they come to speak to focus on the preamble. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the key issue, as set out in the preamble, in reference to the Ngāti Apa decision, is how you determine claims of customary ownership. And the Labor Party got certain things right in the Foreshore and Seabed Bill. It got it right about statutory protection of public access. It got it right about non-alienation, Mr. Chairman, of customary titled land. And what we acknowledge we did not get right, and we freely do this, is about denying access to the court. We stand ready in this House today to work with every other party in this chamber to find common ground for a durable solution to this problem if there is a will on the part of the national government and the Maori Party to do so. And I regret, Mr Chairman, that there is no will. If there was a will, the democratic process would not have been aborted in the way that it has, in lack of select committee consideration. It would not have been transgressed by the refusal to give advice on what the grounds are for customary title. The legal advice that the Attorney-General has on this issue, why has he not been prepared to make that available to the House so that we can have a properly democratic and transparent process? Why is this bill being rushed in without proper select committee examination? Why is it now being ran through under the cover of the Christchurch earthquake? We want a durable solution. That's what Ngāti Apa was looking for.
We have a point of order.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I just want to cite 107 relevancy number 2, where it says, after having called to the attention of the House...
Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. Look, I've made it clear what we're on, and I will determine whether the member goes overboard, and he has 1:20 remaining. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, what we are trying to do, and as set out in the Ngāti Apa decision, how we find a solution to that is durable, that is fair, that is open and that is transparent. And we can see that the answer in this bill does not answer the dilemmas set out in the Ngāti Apa decision. It does not provide for durability. It does not provide in process for transparency or democratic input. It does not settle the issue of Ngāti Apa because it leaves this House and this country more bitterly divided than it was before. It does not settle the issue. John Key has reneged on his undertaking that unless there was broad support for this bill, then it would not go through. And every member of the National Party opposite buries their head in shame because they have received the letters that have been copied to me accusing the National Party of a total sellout, a betrayal of its promises, of being totally misleading and not achieving something that the Labor Party set out to achieve in addressing this bill, which was to bring the country together, which was to bring Parliament together, which was to consider a way of properly addressing these issues.